All right. Good morning, folks. Okay, so I'm just going to jump to it. I wanted to do a stream and I wanted to make a whole video on this subject, but I thought I'd just do it as a stream because it'll work as a good precursor. Maybe not in content, but it'll serve as a good precursor to let people know about the stream I'm going to do with Jim Bob, where if you've been following it, and if you haven't been following it, don't even bother watching any of this shit, because I know most of my audience hasn't followed any of this drama that I've been dragged into. But I thought it would be a good thing to just kind of like do a bit of a stream and then offer some value. And then if people want to go and listen to me rant about the cult with Jim Bob, they can do that. So what I wanted to start with on the stream, I wanted to share a story with you guys. So I had a really interesting call last night, and from a friend of mine who's a realtor in the area, and he does a lot of homestead properties and stuff like that. And I don't work with him in any professional manner. We're just friends and we're truthers and stuff. And so we connect over stuff. And he gave me a call last night to tell me about this piece of land for sale. And I don't need to get into any particular details about the land, but the long story of it is that it was a raw piece of land. Oh, and let me back up for a second. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I spend a lot of time every week looking and evaluating property. And my team, we have this program called Homestead Accelerator, and we're moving people onto the land really quickly right now with the service we do. And it's awesome. And it's brought me a huge level of meaning and purpose in my career lately, which has been just so fun. And anyway, so that's the pretext. The context is he said, you got to check out this piece of land. Okay. And so it was, I'll say it was less than 30 acres, and they're asking 300 and something, maybe 320 or something like that. And it's a relatively, so it's an acreage. The reason he was excited about it is, he was like, hey, if somebody wanted to do the Curtis Stone thing, this is the property. And he was somewhat correct. But my eyes caught its weakest flaws right away, whereas his just wouldn't, because I just have so much more experience evaluating land than he does in a specific niche, despite the fact that he's a realtor. He's looking more at homes, and this is typical with realtors. And there's lots of realtors out there who really look at land. Don't get me wrong. He's not necessarily one of them. And I say that with all the best. I'd say that to his face. You know, it's nothing. It's nothing. It's no criticism. It's just a fact. So I look at this piece of land and I could immediately tell that it was on an exposed ridge. There's trees and stuff on it, but it's on a turnaround of a ridge where it gets more exposed because you have more exposed surface area. And he's like, what do you think about this? And I looked at that and I said, yeah, that's its weak point right away. But I'll just tell you what, brother, there's no way they're going to sell this property. And I told him a number that I thought was he could sell it at fairly quickly. I said, if you go to 275, you'll get a lot more inquiries. And if you go to 250, you'll sell it. And the thing is right now is too many people especially the Canadian market. In the US market, it's quite a bit of a different game. We're observing the Southeast is still the gravy train as far as availability and value. Yes, you have the hot, muggy climate, but what you can get for infrastructure, buildings, land infrastructure, farm infrastructure, just far outweighs pretty much anywhere in the US that you can look. We can find places in Alabama, and Georgia and Mississippi for $4,000 to $2,000 to $4,000 an acre with infrastructure. And so he's showing me this place that converts to be about 12,000 an acre Canadian. That would be about 10,000 US at today's rate. And I just said, okay, well, I'm gonna walk you through, and that's what I'm gonna do here. This is the value that I'm offering for you, and the lessons that you can learn from my mistakes and what I've experienced the last 3 years on this property development, this build. So I said, okay, let's say he gets 300,000, or let's say he wants to lower it to 300, and even 300, maybe he'll get a little bit more velocity on interest there. But if I said it'd be 250, you'll sell it pretty quick. But the thing is, you got to factor in on a homestead. And so I'll take you through mine a little bit and share with you some of the costs that I've incurred to give you an idea of what you might expect to pay if you're going to develop from raw land. Okay. So the first thing is that you got to look at when you're looking at a parcel of raw land is the topography. What does the topography look like? And so, and of course, I'm going to kind of skip climate here because I'm talking about a local deal. We know what the climate is. And that would be the same for you. If you were looking to start a homestead in a particular area, you'd understand that context already fairly. But you want to look at the topography. And if there's any challenges in the topography regarding access, buildings and infrastructure, soil, water retention, any of those things, because they all intersect. You know, when we did that video series about the 11 scales of permanence that we use to evaluate a property, I kind of talked about that throughout that series, how they intersect, how your topography can even affect your climate. Your climate can affect your topography through erosion and things like that. But vegetation and wildlife can affect your water, can increase or decrease your retention. Soil can increase or decrease water retention, and geography, and all these, they all intersect. But what I said was regarding this piece of land. So we're talking about, call it 30 to 40 acres of land that they're asking 300,000 for it. The only infrastructure on it is a pretty minimal driveway. There's no culverts. There's no drainage ditches. So in the spring and the melt, it'd be a nightmare. In the winter, it'd still be a nightmare too. And then there was some water infrastructure. There was a well drilled that had a pump in it. And then there was, what was the other basic? He was bringing electrical service to the property. So those two things there are pretty huge. But the thing I said is, right out of the gate, he's going to have at least $50,000 to $80,000. Okay, so we're going to start stacking these things up, and this is where I'm going to bring value to you guys in considerations when you're looking at raw land and what you want to do with it. So the driveway was sort of nebulous. As he said to me, if somebody wanted to do the Curtis Stone off-grid homestead like mine, typical, similar, same climate zone, similar topography, and all that. This is what they could do. I said, okay, so a family of 4 wants to buy this place. What are they going to get into it for? So let's say they buy it for 300. Immediately they're going to have 50 to 80,000 on the driveway. What that looks like if there's no crush on the driveway, and it's basically it was maybe a skid trail for logging that was sort of carved into a driveway, and that's typically what we would see in rural areas like this that I'm in British Columbia, where we have good mountains and such. Is that driveway is going to be majorly problematic in the winter. If it's not even and it's not smoothed out, running a plow on it sucks. And I can tell you that in firsthand, because that's what I had to do when we got here. We bought this place in the fall. And so we didn't spend a full winter up here that year, but I was here and I needed to get access to get my truck in. So I needed to do snow maintenance. That involved an investment in a machine that can do it. So depending on the machine you're talking, you might be lucky to find a used skid steer for 30 grand maybe. But if you want a good machine, a new machine's 80 grand Canadian, call it 65 grand US. And then you got implements in there. So you need to have all those things to maintain it. Then, that could be, and you could finance those and lease those things too. So, right, you can spread out those costs. But on the driveway itself, 50 to 80 grand in just material plus labor. And so if you're going to do that labor yourself, great, then you'll save it. That's where the investment in a machine is going to be very helpful to you. But if you're going to outsource that work, big time costs. So what I'm saying, 50 to 80 grand in material for a driveway improvements in this similar context would be double it for paying an operator to do it. Now, maybe not, maybe actually a really good operator, maybe they'll do it as low as 20 grand. Okay. But either way, that's what you're looking at there. And what that really involves is grading it better, and then putting in ditches on the high side to divert water off the road in surge rains and snowmelt, and then culverts that might need to cross a switchback or not. If you're on good topography, sometimes if the driveway was done well, like mine was fairly well, it wasn't perfect, but it was okay. A lot of my drainages don't have to go through culverts. They just divert off the switchback. So the switchback goes like this, and then the water just diverts off this way and dumps this way. And then the switchback carries on this way. But there are some places where there's accumulation that I had to put a drainage ditch in and then I have a culvert cross the road to expel that water on the low side. And so you got culverts, drain ditches, and then material. And so that's a lot there. Then I said, even on the water, okay, so they got a well. Okay, that's really good, because a well in the mountains can cost you up to 25 grand, 30 grand, depending on how deep you have to go. I spent 27 G's on a Canadian on mine, and it's 300 and something feet deep. And I got 10 GPM, and that's fantastic. And it's worth, it's absolutely 100% worth that investment, because it is, if you don't have water, you have nothing. So water is almost your starting point. Of course, everybody's greater context makes these things very complicated, but that's what it would be there. And so from the well, now you need infrastructure for the water. So that well water has to move to a house or a build site and be buried. So you're going to have your well come up, and then you'll have what's called a pitless adapter that could be as deep as 8 feet below where your well cap sits. And then that goes underground to your house, into your pressure tanks in the house. And then that's how, in a rural property like mine, how you have water all winter from a drilled well. But that alone, that just getting that water from a pitless adapter, digging that trench, putting that pressurized line, you need to have at least 100 PSI line in there, at least 1.25, maybe 1 inch, depending on what you plan to do with it. But that's got to go through a sleeve and then buried and then go into the foundation of your house. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, now you need to get that water available on your property. Okay, so you might spend, call it a couple $1,000 if you're not including the pressure tanks into the house build, but just to get it there, it might be a couple $1,000 in machine work and material, maybe $3,000. But then to get water around your property, okay, so fire suppression is our biggest thing out here right now. And that's my number one priority now, especially now that I don't have to worry about irrigating gardens. We're in the fall season. I don't have to worry about watering things. I don't have to worry about maintaining things. Now I can direct all my attention that's on water into fire suppression. And it's a good time to do it, because I don't have to worry about fire anymore. We're getting seasonal rains now. Our risk of fire in our particular region is now done. And it's been that way for a couple of weeks. So it's been a huge, huge relief. But so to get water around the property, so to deliver enough water from my well point somewhere, that's infrastructure. But ultimately what you need on a property like mine is you need to have some kind of gravity feed system that acts as a flywheel for your water. Because if you're only getting water when you're running your well or your pump, that's water only coming out in one place at the limited GPM and PSI that you have coming out of that well. So for me, that works out to be 40 PSI at 10 GPM. I think that's what it is coming out. Then that goes up to a collection of cisterns so that I can just pump water anytime that it's needed in the cisterns. And now I have 2 sources of water, because now I can draw from the cisterns here, and I can also pump the well. So if I tee off anywhere in the line between my well and the cisterns, I can get a combined pressure or just the head pressure from the cisterns at 85 feet above and then it gets higher the lower I go on my land. But I get about 40 GPM just coming out of that cistern. If I pump the water as well, actually doesn't change the pressure much. It just gives me more flow so that I can run water in more places. But that is important. So just for me to go from my well to my cisterns was about $8,000 in material just there. Then to get that main prime 100 line, which I run a 1.25 inch line, that's my main delivery line that splits off in a number of places from the cistern, essentially, on my property. I have spent $20,000 in just primary irrigation infrastructure. Okay, so there's another number. And then another thing that this guy's going to have to do, and this is just to start building and putting, say, gardens down, is he's going to have to do significant amount of work on just the geography. And so for on my property, even though I'm a mountainous property, it's challenging, there's no question, but I was somewhat blessed, and it's why I chose this. One of the main kind of top 5 reasons I chose this property is I had this cleared area. The main sort of exposed area that we live in, and most of our infrastructure is on this homestead. The whole size is 40, but this inner part is 8 acres. That was logged 40 or 50 years ago, and that's why it's bald, and that's why there's no real soil in here, because when you just log a forest and clear cut it, and you don't leave anything on the forest floor just erodes. And that's what's happened here. And that's why I've had such a significant investment in regeneration of the soil. And that's the next thing I'll talk about. But so basically, I'll talk about that after one other thing when we get to infrastructure, is that, so just for me to start anything, whether it's a house build, a piece of infrastructure, a road, a garden, any of that, I needed to terrace land. And so, yes, my land, I had a good amount of areas that didn't need too much terracing, but it still was quite significant. And I would say that I've put in the total hours that are on my machines, because my machines have been 99% mine, especially the Mini X has been 99.9% me. Skid steer probably 90%, probably 95 now, but just call it the total hours I've put on those machines. I've got 300 hours on the Mini X, and I've got 500 hours on the skid steer. So that's been great. It's a stacking functions thing, because now I'm a fairly decent machine operator, nowhere near the professionals I have helping me over the last couple of weeks, but I'm okay. But that's, if you had to pay somebody for those hours, whew, I mean, and granted, if you were paying a good operator, you would be paying them significantly less hours, because a lot of my hours were learned hours. But you also might want to have machines too, because if you're on a rural property, having heavy equipment is, at least a tractor with a 3-point hitch, might have a pallet lift in the back and a boom. You know, you got an investment, but it's a must. So you've got that, and so the machining time just to do all that, and then the machining time to now. So we're talking machining time to build infrastructure to go anywhere, either it's a house build or a garden. So then you go to a garden, and now you've got to make soil. You got to improve soil, and this is the challenge of the mountain landscape. And now you've got to spend time doing that. Hopefully you have soil on site, which is what you should first look for. And I actually say, one thing I've really learned from my operator here. Well, I got 2 guys running heavy equipment right now, but the main guy, he's in his 60s, and he's got so many hours. I think it's 100,000 or something close to that, like a massive amount of time on a machine. He says that one of the greatest things you want to look for, and this is something I've never really talked about, and so I want to talk about it now, because this has been a big learning lesson for me the last couple of weeks, is something an asset you really want to pinpoint on a property. And you can get a sense of it on Google Earth, but a site visit would be the best time to look for it, is look for a place where you can have a pit, a place that you can pull material from. because bringing in material, especially if you're rural like me, is very expensive. I pay $400 a load, and I can't get a truck and pup. I can only get a truck. So to bring a truck and pup, that's the dump trailer on a dump truck, only costs an extra $50. So I could get 2 truckloads essentially for $450, but I can't because of my access. And so now I have to do a truck for $400. And then concrete trucks, that's a whole other game. But so that's significant. So if you can have a pit where you can pull material from, and then if it works out that it turns into a pond, even better. And that's what we've done in both of the cases of my ponds, because we're on pond number 2 today, and it'll probably finish today, is the massive amount of material that we've pulled from there to first finish in the first pond. Most of that material, the initial material we used for backfill in the house, but we still need another 10, 20 loads to finish that. And then the rest of that material is used to build the high side of that pond so that it wouldn't spill over. And then, of course, build up the Keyway Dam. And I've got some killer from the field videos coming right now, 5 videos coming out today that show this stuff, and go into it quite detail, and everything on the homestead in general. But you need to have some kind of pit you can pull from. So anyways, then you got, going back to where I was going, is then you got to build soil. And again, hopefully you got somewhere to pull that from. But either way, you got to move it around, especially in the case of my mountainous property. And so right there, okay, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars right out of the gate on just infrastructure to start a garden or build a house. So this is fundamentally what I wanted to, the point I wanted to get to in this. And I think what we'll do, and I wanted to share that with you guys, because as I was talking to my realtor friend there, I realized, and I kind of said to him jokingly, I was like, I mean, you realize people pay me a lot of money to give advice like this. and we laughed, and it was funny. And I thought, well, I might as well share this experience, because this is the kind of thing that I do. I've done in consulting forever, whether I'm talking to, didn't really ever deal with realtors in the past, but people that are looking to develop property for homesteading or build a farm. These are the kinds of things that I throw at them. And I thought I'd share it with you because it was kind of fresh on my mind, very relevant to the work I'm doing right now. And I thought, you know, there's a lot of people that want to get on the land, and that's what I'm trying to help people with through the Homestead Accelerator. And even when I put together the Finding the Perfect Homestead Property course, that was the motivation too, is to give people the tools to how to do it. But what we discovered is that a lot of people would just rather have it done for them, and they'll pay for that. And so that's what we've done in the Homestead Accelerator. If you're curious about any of that stuff, just go into the show notes of this video, and you'll go to the Homestead Accelerator. But I thought I'd share it with you guys because it was a very enlightening conversation for him. And I think, you know, one little prediction I'm going to make here with Canadian real estate is we're in the next couple of years, and it's already started. We're seeing people foreclosing on their mortgages because they can't afford to renew at current interest rates, because they bought their property at the height of valuation, but also at the bottom of interest rates. And now the valuations are sliding, not that much, but their interest rates have come up so much that now they're going to renew. When they bought, they signed in at 2 or 3%, and now they're looking to sign in at you know, it could be 8 or 9% very soon, and that's unsustainable. That's almost a 3, 4x, 5x even increase in interest. So it's not a good scenario, but it's also a scenario if you're a good scenario if you're ready and you're prepared to and you've got some cash, you've got some liquid capital that you can utilize, and you could really come out of this opportunity that we're coming into on top. And it's not necessarily, I think this whole New World Order thing that we're in is going to drag on for a long time. I've been saying this for years, that this is just going to go on, but there's going to be all these opportunities and ratcheting it up the tyranny as we go through it. And you can benefit from that if you're prepared. And if you want to get on the land, this might be the greatest opportunity. What it might look like for you is you might have to still get a mortgage. I'm not saying don't get a mortgage, or, you know, get a mortgage or whatever. You're going to have to make the decision of what the call is that's best for you. But the reality is, if you do want to get a mortgage, you're coming into a high interest rate market, but the valuations might be significantly less. So properties let's say complete homestead properties that has food, water, energy, shelter, at least the infrastructure to make those things happen on the property. You'll, in Canada, things you're seeing for 800,000 right now, within a couple of years might go as low as 5 or less, depending on how desperate people get. But then, let's say it even goes down to 300. And in history, we've seen prices like this drop, because it's like my dad always used to tell me, something's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. Your story about why that property needs to be valued at this, your connections and lifestyle or life experience you've had on that property don't mean anything to a buyer. Unfortunately, it's a sad reality, but it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay. And if we get into that kind of scenario, a mortgage on 300,000 at 10% interest isn't that bad if you had 150,000 down. Okay. So again, I'm not saying you should get a mortgage or not. It's just, I leveraged mortgages to build wealth. Okay. So I did it, even though I don't like the idea of debt. I hate the financial crony monetary system we have. But it was a tool I used to build wealth, and those tools are still available to us. They haven't taken mortgages away yet. So that might be the kind of situation you get into. So anyways, I wanted to share that with you guys. I'll just kind of peek at the chat a bit, and I'm going to jump into, I'll just tell Jim Bob here right in 10 minutes. So I'm going on to the great Jim Bob, the artist. You've probably seen his memes before. The dude's a legend in his right, and he makes really, I would say, high level comedy. It's nuanced, it's interesting, it's not defaming. It is, it's brilliant, and it's simple, and it's always funny. And my wife and I enjoy his stuff. And I didn't even really know. I'd always seen his memes around. I'd never really associated any particular artist with it. But one of the guys that worked for me a couple of years ago, he told me about Jim Bob, and I was like, oh, this guy's great. And then I saw, of course, during this whole debacle with the Beg Bear, that he started this tirade of BS against Jim Bob, and accused him of being a pedophile, because apparently he made a ring when he was a jeweler that had a pizza on it, and he tagged an artist on Instagram that the Beg Bear said was Marina Abramovich, the spirit cooking lady, which was incorrect, which is not true, and he never proved that. And so he smeared a guy. That's a pretty serious thing to call somebody, and especially in the truth community. And so one thing I'll say here before I jump into, and I might spend the next 10 minutes on this. One thing I'll say here before I jump into Jim Bob's stream is that I've had a number of people, and full disclaimer to my audience, most people at this point probably have no idea what I'm talking about. And I would say, if you don't even bother going to listen to my stream with Jim Bob. Don't even bother getting hung up into it. It's totally a BS thing. It was a fallout between friends that got really nasty. And the only reason I've spent time on this is that it was brought to me. And it all started with a tweet, an amicable reply to a tweet by our cult leader friend. And it turned into a psychotic tirade of text messages, which I shared the link for on my Twitter, at Off-Grid Stone. Just scroll down my profile if you haven't seen them. Horrendous behavior from somebody who's supposed to be your friend. And so a lot of my followers who watch my stuff and his stuff, and we intermingle in our followers, there's no question about it. But I've found that it's actually quite small. It really is, as far as the true believers of the cult, it's maybe 80 people. And then there's crossover. People don't really give a shit what he's saying, and they find him funny here and there, and whatever, I don't care. Find stuff funny, I don't give a shit. But the only reason I'm bringing, I've put as much attention into this issue as I have is because it was brought to me. He was introduced to me. I didn't know who he was before our mutual friend, who he also defamed, Stephen Cornett, who's the nicest guy ever, introduced me to him, and then we became friends. And personal friends, I guess, because we would text each other, and we'd never met in person. But he was very nice to me when we first met. He flattered me, and he said he liked my content, and it was a big inspiration for him on the homestead. And who wouldn't appreciate that? And so the only reason I'm going through all this, or talking about all this stuff, and this stream with Jim Bob will be the last thing I do on any of this, and I'm done, and I won't bother talking about it again. But the reason, because people ask me, they say, Curtis, why even bothering doing this? Like you're degrading yourself. And I think there's some truth to that statement. But the thing that I would say to that question to me is, this didn't happen to you. It happened to me. Okay. Owen was my friend, not your friend. You may have been one of his followers, and you may have been one of the poor suckers that gave him money to buy a piece of land in his name. But you weren't his friend. He doesn't know you. You might have a bear name, but he doesn't know you. He was my friend. And my friend turned into a crazy ex-girlfriend, as evidenced in his text messages. And the only reason I've gone through with any of this is to expose the fraud, liar, and cheat he is, because he's not a good person. He's a very mean-spirited, parasitic narcissist. And he has done damage to the truth community. He's done literally no damage to my career. Like, I just hide his trolls and then they're gone. It has, in my life, I'm crushing. I'm building a house. I'm building ponds. I'm with my family all the time. Like I just turn this stuff off and it's gone. But so it's seemingly like I've been embroiled in this thing, but not really, because it's just when I go on the internet. And I've hidden, I think, his 80 true believers. So I don't even see any of their shit anymore. They're, despite their stupid jort speed and the dumb, retarded, toilet humor that basically is his shtick. But the only reason I've done this is because this happened to me, not you. And yes, it's easy for you if you're a viewer or you're a fan of both my stuff and his stuff, and all the power to you if you are. But the only reason in my opinion, that you're telling me to not get hung up on this is because it didn't happen to you. It happened to me. He approached me. He attacked me publicly. He called me ridiculous, and is still, the guy's probably put hundreds of hours of content into talking shit about me and saying things like squirtus, and I wear jorts, and I have a dead dad, and I have a gay brother, and just the most dumb, unintelligent, low vibrational shit talking that doesn't provide value for anybody unless you're one of his true believers, and you're sitting there going, Spurtus, and you're trying to bait me and troll me online, which has zero effect on my daily life, because look at what I'm doing. And this is what I said to the beg bear when I stood in the court of the jester king, in a court that I knew I couldn't get remedy because the man has no honor and he can hit a mute button. And but is what I tried to just show is that everything you accuse people of, you do, and it is ridiculous. And we'll get into it a lot more with Jim Bob, and I think we'll have some fun with it, because we're going to try to show how I'm not going to make the claim that the beg bear and the whole bear cult is a psyop, but we're going to present a lot of evidence to show that it has a lot of the hallmarks of what a psyop is, and what a really deranged individual can do to have sort of a Tasmanian devil effect, in a sense, to go into a niche market of content, which at first with the beg bear was sort of conservative comedy when he was still hanging out with folks like Rogan and Gavin McInnes and Stefan Molyneux and people like that. And then he kind of got excommunicated in a way, because it looked like he was just talk shit about everybody. And then he just constantly just burns bridges and has to go to the next thing. And then the next thing he got into was the truther stuff. And that's where I interacted with him, because he had some great content about truther stuff during the scamdemic. He presented some really funny, good content that was high level. It wasn't about talking shit and making dick jokes. It was about dethroning the New World Order, and it was fucking awesome. And that's what originally really impressed me about him and why we became friends. But then he has just burned, I don't know, is it 20 people now in the truth community that he became friends with and garnered their audience, and then burned, as he calls, false idols there. And then I was unfortunately one of those people. And again, like I said, it literally had no effect on my life whatsoever, except dumb comments online. But I've been a content creator for longer than he has, at least on YouTube. And so I've been dealing with this shit forever. So it's insignificant. But I was in the mix of that. And Jim Bob and I are going to explore how this thing, I'm calling it Operation Barn Burner, because in a way it's almost like what he's done is he's paired himself with all these truthers, whether it be, flat earthers, people who talk about law stuff. I would be included in that. People that talk about alternative health stuff, stuff that's legit. I mean, I'm a truther. I'm into, I have to say, most of the people that the Big Bear talks to on his show, I'm actually friends with, or have become friends with, or I also like their content. And so what Jim Bob and I are going to demonstrate is how this guy, whether he's a PSYOP or not, Operation Barn Burner, what he's doing is he's leading people into a barn and then burning it down, and mostly just hurting himself in the process of it. And so that's what we're going to riff on. I think it'll be kind of fun. I had a couple phone calls with Jim Bob the other day, and we just had so many laughs about this. So I think at the end of the day, this will just be a bit of comedy for Owen. He's the only one who's allowed to be a comedian, so he can say anything about anybody. He can call Jim Bob a pedophile. He can call Stephen Cornett's wife, who has nothing to do with anything he does, a dog eater because she's Asian. He can defame, and just the litany of people he's burned. Go on the Reddit, the subreddit group. I think it's r/Owen Benjamin. It's hilarious. I mean, the bridges he's burned has been unbelievable. And so what I see is a guy who is completely deranged, and he's like the Joker. He's actually in his framework that he always uses with this gamma, omega, alpha, calls himself a Bravo, all this stuff, which is, it's funny, but it's kind of a limited way to really describe somebody. He's actually the Joker. He's actually the Omega. He's so bent on destruction that he'll ultimately just destroy himself, but take a lot of people down with him. And I think the only reason I, at this point, care to spend any more time on this is that I feel somewhat responsible for a lot of the young men that might be spending their time trolling on his behalf, which is a completely retarded waste of time. If you're a young man, you could be doing so many more productive things with your time. And I feel somewhat responsible because I've seen, I have been elevated to be a role model for a lot of young men, and a lot of young men watch my content. They're the largest majority of my fan base on my demographics on YouTube. But also I have parents that reach out to me all the time and say, my 13-year-old son has been really influenced by you. And I take that, I don't take that lightly. And I feel a sense of responsibility for that. And I see a lot of people like that in my community that also follow his comedy. And I think they're somewhat upset to see this thing happen with me and him. So anyways, I'm going to jump on Jim Bob's live stream right now. What I'll do is I shared the link on my Twitter. So go on my Twitter at Offgrid. So actually, I'll do it here too, just in case any of you guys don't have it. And I'm sorry I didn't get to look at much of the comments, but we'll do that in Jim Bob's stream. We'll be able to do that. I'll just share the link with you. So we're going to do it on Rockfin. He was on YouTube as well. And apparently one of the things that the Big Bear's troll army, or whatever you want to call them, they kind of gang stalk you, and they'll go and they'll flag your stream. And so it said, Jim Bob says that they've flagged his stream, so we probably won't be able to do it on YouTube. So let's do it on Rockfin, where that won't happen. And so here it is in the chat here, folks. And I'll just kind of spam it in there, and then you guys can jump in there, and he's in there right now. And then I'll jump in there. And then what I'll also do here is for the time being, I'll put this in the show notes of this video, so that if you were to jump into this video with a slight delay, you'll be able to see that in the top of the description here. I'll just put that there for now. It won't stay there prior, but that's where that is. And okay, folks, so I'm going to jump over with Jim Bob. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about Operation Barn Burner, and yeah, we'll have a few laughs, and maybe we'll have a somewhat of an enlightening conversation. All right, folks, we'll see you over there.